Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we've got quite a few fun bits of news. We've got a few more cards from the next Japanese set, Bandit Ring. We've seen a few already, there's a few more, including 2 new EXs which have been revealed. And you know what it's like on this podcast, we don't wait for the whole set to be revealed. If there's a new card been revealed, we like to have a talk about it now. And then we are finally going to get to something which I've been wanting to do for a long time, but not actually had the opportunity to yet, due to other things essentially jumping in the way. We're going to do a building decks on a budget segment, giving a few little hints and tips for how to save a little bit of money when you buy. And also giving you some ideas of decks which should, in theory, be viable this format and next and won't cost the earth. So to those people, I've had a lot of requests for this. It is in fact the most requested segment. We have finally got there, so life is good. Few things to mention first of all. I'm going to start with the non-new card news. There is going to be a shiny Rayquaza EX box now. We already knew this. It's got the bad colourless Rayquaza EX, the one you're not going to want him to be used in your deck. That's a card you get with it. But what's interesting for us today is that it has a jumbo Mega Rayquaza EX, or I should say shiny Mega Rayquaza EX. Now, presumably, we don't know this for a fact, but we can assume it's a jumbo version of the full art shiny Mega Rayquaza EX from Bandit Ring. And it's actually an English image we've got. And it's the only thing I really want to mention very quickly. It's got a new ancient trait. And the ancient trait is Theta Max. Now, I think on a previous podcast, I referred to Theta as Omega, which is silly. Omega's the one that looks a bit like an inverted horseshoe. Just a horseshoe, really. And Theta is the one that's kind of like the 0 with a line in the middle. So my apologies if I did mess that up previously. Bit of Greek there for you. And Theta Max is a very, very good ancient trait. One of potentially the best ones. When one of your Pokemon becomes this Pokemon, heal all damage from it. That means that when you evolve from regular Rayquaza EX into Mega Rayquaza EX, or at least this shiny one, you get to heal it completely. Now, to be fair, we've already had a really good Mega Rayquaza, that's the colourless one, and a very, very promising, could be really good in the future, that's the Dragon one. So, whether this one's going to be enough, I don't know, to be honest, but let's wait and see. If we've got 3 viable ones, that would be quite silly. And there is another Rayquaza set coming out. This is the Mega Rayquaza collection. Now, the one I just mentioned comes with a regular size, colourless Rayquaza, but it's EX, but it's not as good as the one from Roaring Skies. So the one from Roaring Skies will be the one you continue to use. And it comes from, like I said, this jumbo version I've said. Now, the Mega Rayquaza collection comes with a Mega Rayquaza figure and a special holo promotional Rayquaza card. Now, this was released in Japan. I don't know if we went for it. I can't remember. I believe we did, but it was a while ago. Essentially, they released a book in Japan, the Pokemon Trading Card Game Illustration Collection, way back in December. And it had a non-holo Rayquaza. And we're finally getting the same version of this card, but we are getting it as a holo card, so go us. It's got an ability which prevents attacks to it when it's on the bench, which is, we've seen it with cards like Squirtle in the past. It's useful. And it's got an attack for 2 fire, 1 lightning, 1 colourless, 130 damage, discard the top 3 cards of your deck. It's not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but as a moderately efficient non-EX attacker in a dragon deck, you could do worse. Having said that, I think the Reshiram does like 110 for maybe 4 energy, so it's far from amazing, but it's kind of cool. It's a fun little card. I don't think it's going to be particularly great. Now, the last thing is the new Japanese set. Now, this one is coming out. It's a Japanese XY8 set. It's coming out on the 25th of September, and they're finally doing sets based around Mega Mewtwo X and Mega Mewtwo Y. And we're having Blue Impact, Mega Mewtwo X, and Red Flash, Mega Mewtwo Y. For those that don't remember or are a little bit newer, Japanese sets often come out as 2 separate sets, and then we will combine them into one for ours. So in Japan, they actually got an X set and a Y set, so you had to buy the particular set to get the cards you wanted, whereas in the UK, US, Europe, etc., they're amalgamated into one X and Y set. 59 cards in each set, excluding any secret rares. But they're actually called Pokemon XY Break Blue Impact and Pokemon XY Break Red Flash. So, and we don't know what this is, but think of it like when Diamond and Pearl went to Platinum. So there was the Diamond and Pearl sets, and then there was the Platinum sets. Things of that nature. They're kind of starting a new block, if you will. Now, what's interesting with this is the break. Now, Emerald Break was the first time they used this word, if you will, in Japanese sets, and you'll remember that Delta Revolution came in that set. So the hint seems to be, and this is just a hint, this is guesswork, I'm not the only person that's guessed this, other people have suggested this as well. The suggestion is there's going to be some kind of new mechanic, or maybe a combination of mechanics, which is going to essentially set up evolution Pokemon to be more competitive. And we've seen this, we've seen in Bandit Ring, they're bringing out that stadium which allows any grass Pokemon to evolve whenever they want. We've seen the Eevee, although that came out some time ago now, where you can evolve it as soon as you attach a basic energy to it. And of course we've seen Delta Revolution in Roaring Skies, which was Emerald Break in Japan. So no huge news to really tell you about now. We don't know. All we've got is the name, Pokemon XY Break. We do know that Mega Mewtwo X and Y are finally coming out in the card game, which to me seems like it took a very long time. Mewtwo's kind of like Charizard. It's one of those, it's one of the poster boys for the game as a whole, so I am surprised it took this long to actually come out. But hey ho, there we go. We're finally getting it. As for any more information about the set, I suppose wait and see. Now, before we start talking about the new cards, it is time, well, that time, not the only time, of course, but one of the times today, I need to give a shameless plug to my YouTube channel. We now do have a custom URL, so you just need to go to youtube.com/PTCGRadio, and it will be there waiting for you. Round 7 from UK Nationals has gone up, and it went up out of order essentially because I had the raw files for round 7 and 8, edited and produced them, and I didn't have the raw files for the earlier rounds yet, so I just went ahead and put round 7 up. But literally, I've just paused the podcast and I've just come back to it because I have just uploaded round 1 from UK Nationals. It's the full stream, including the interview from the day. I have put a little introduction to it. I have edited it down, gotten rid of all the big pauses and any of that rubbish. I've edited it down to a better version than the streams. You don't have to sit there and wade through hours of stuff. So please go and check that out. It's taken far longer than I thought it would, and it turns out the rounds 2 and 4 I've now got to go and redo. There was a problem with the raw file, and I thought I'd fixed it, and I did for rounds 1 and 3, but not 2 and 4. But hey-ho, these things happen. So I'm going to go and have a little play around with that after this podcast. What you need to do after you've listened to this podcast is get yourself over to youtube.com/PTCGRadio. I'm putting a lot of time and effort in at the moment trying to grow the YouTube channel, and essentially if people keep coming over and watching the videos, I'll keep playing around, and if they don't, I will get bored and stop. After UK Nationals, I've got 2 league challenges pre-Roaring Skies to go up, so there is a whole bunch of content, and I've got a camera, so I'm going to be running around recording other tournaments this year, as well, of course, as the footage which Terry Goodacre and Matt Blower are very kindly providing me with. If there's anything you want to see on my YouTube channel, as always, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, and I will do my very best to accommodate. I'm thinking of doing the actual top 5 cards from past sets. Now that we've had, hundreds of tournaments, we can actually say what the top 5 cards were, not from recent sets, but from old sets. And I'm thinking about expanding beyond the trading card game, but I don't quite know what to do. So if anyone's got any ideas, I want to reach fans that don't play the trading card game but are interested in Pokemon, and there are, tens of thousands, couple 100,000 people out there that like Pokemon but not the trading card game. So let me know if there's anything you're interested in. For the minute, I'm thinking I might start reviewing some episodes of the anime show, just to give me an excuse to watch some episodes of the anime show. But let me know if that sounds like fun, or if there's anything else you think I can do. Like I say, tweet us at the Wassy, or chuck us an email at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. So looking at the new cards, we have got a Tyranitar and a Mega Tyranitar. and the regular Tyranitar EX, and this has been a little bit of a theme. The ones that have Megas aren't particularly great as regulars, although having said that, Latios EX it is donkerific. So Tyranitar EX has got 2 attacks, it does 60 damage for a dark and a double colourless, and 130 plus 10 to each of your own bench Pokemon for 2 dark and a double colourless. It's fine, it's got a funky picture, but that's about it. The Mega Tyranitar EX, however, I quite like. It's got a new kind of ancient trait, which is coming out in Bandit Ring, Fated Double, which means it can have 2 Pokemon tools attached to it. It's the same one that Entei has got, and I think it's Entei who I accidentally called it Omega Double last week. Silly me. Although nobody brought that up to me on Twitter, which is weird. Usually my mistakes get brought up to me very quickly. And it's got 1 attack, but oh my goodness, it is a doozy. For 2 dark and a double colourless, 110 damage, plus 60 for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. Now this sounds like it might be a mistranslation, but it's been up for days on Pokebeach.com, and I haven't heard anyone say it's wrong, whereas, for instance, we had, there was a fantastic mistranslation of Regigigas EX from Next Destinies, which I think the translation said you could do something like 30 more damage, and for every 30 more damage you do to them, do 30 to you. So you could essentially do infinite damage and one-hit KO anything. Quickly rectified, but damn it, I still made that into a deck and took it to 33rd at the ECC, biggest tournament in Europe. So Regigigas, we need a good Regigigas again. I know there's a Regigigas in the format. I know some people are playing it. I don't like it. I want a good Regigigas. But going back to this, if it is just 60 more damage, if they've got damage on, it's not particularly good. If it's 60 damage for each damage counter, it's amazing. Now, recently there's been a trend on Facebook and Twitter and all of that. Every time anyone sees a new card, they're like, oh my god, play it with Crobat to do the extra damage. Yes, we know Crobat adds extra damage, but adding, 9 to 12 slots in your deck for 3 or 4 Zubat, Crobat, and Golbat is going to let you run out of space very quickly and lead to inconsistent decks. It works with something like Landorus where you're already doing bench damage. It doesn't work with everything Let It Go. Having said that, works beautifully with Mega Tyranitar. Use Golbat and Crobat to put a bit of damage on them and then do 170 or more with Mega Tyranitar, and you will very, very quickly be one-hit KOing anything. And you could do that with a 2-2-2 line. So, yeah, Mega Tyranitar has got a huge amount of potential. One thing holding Mega Tyranitar back, and this is very, very good, firstly, the attack cost maybe, but it's a double colourless and 2 Mega Turbos. It is not outside the realm of possibility you could get all of that going in one turn. But secondly, it's weak to fighting, and what's going to be really good next year is Groudon. And of course, Groudon chooses when it comes out. So you can sit there on the bench and your opponent can't use Pokemon Catcher, Lysandre, etc. to drag you into the active. You essentially choose when you come into the active. So Mega Tyranitar can't just get going a turn early, Lysandre up and kill you. It's got to actually wait till you come out. So that does mitigate it somewhat. So let's not go crazy. You could also use something like a Hawlucha with Silent Lab to turn off your own ability so that you do hit for weakness. And you could one-hit KO because you do 60 damage and you add a Strong Energy Muscle Band Fighting Stadium. You can do 240 for 1 energy, although you would need a Silent Lab down. So I'm lying to you as I'm thinking it through while I'm saying you can't one-hit KO for 1 energy because you need Fighting Stadium to do 120 damage to double to 240 to one-hit KO the Tyranitar. But if you've got a Fighting Stadium down, you can't also have a Silent Lab down, which means you can't turn off your own ability. And you need to turn off your ability in order to hit for weakness. Gutted. But still, it's pretty gosh darn good, There are, essentially what I'm saying is there are viable fighting Pokemon that can take him down. So his weakness does hold him back, which is good because it's a supremely powerful card. We've got a new trainer been revealed, Eco Arm. It allows you to just take 3 Pokemon tools from your discard pile back into your deck. Before Lysandre's trump card was banned, this card would have been absolute utter garbage that wasn't even worth considering. Now that Lysandre's trump card has been banned, this is potentially viable again. This is something which I can see people wanting to have a play with, wanting to have a look at. It's not going to be amazing by any stretch of the imagination. But in some decks where you're really desperate for Pokemon tools, where you really rely on them, it can be useful. If your deck really revolves around Pokemon tools, you can get them back into your deck. An early Sycamore, because we're expecting to lose Juniper, could really screw you up. So, hey-ho. We've also had a new type of energy revealed, and Pokemon seem to be saying essentially every type is going to get their own energy. We've seen herbal energy for grass Pokemon, strong energy for fighting Pokemon. We've seen mystery energy for psychic Pokemon. We saw bad energy, which is not going to be the English name, is coming out in Bandit Ring for dark Pokemon. We've seen fairy energy, if that's what it's called. And we've got a new one. Flash energy. And they seem to be going now, essentially what they seem to be doing is essentially mirroring tools in an energy. The fairy energy is a slightly weaker version of Floatstone. Strong energy is just Muscle Band. Bad energy is Rocky Helmet. Flash energy is Weakness Policy. You can only attach it to an electric Pokemon, otherwise it just gets discarded. It is one electric energy, nice and easy. And it removes your weakness. Now, as soon as that came out, everyone went, oh my god, it's getting rid of weakness, this is going to be amazing. Well, hold your horses. When was the last time you saw somebody playing weakness policy? When was the last time you saw a plasma deck playing Plasma Frigate that removed a weakness of any Pokemon that has plasma energy attached to them? The point I'm making is this. Everybody thinks weakness is a big deal, and it is. People hit for weakness a lot of the time. People will make decks to hit for weakness. People rarely make decks to avoid weakness, even when we're given things. The Stage 2s like Levani and Exploud in recent formats, which are Stage 2s which have gotten rid of weakness, haven't been played. So I would hold off a little bit. The thing with the special energies are, Enhanced Hammer gets rid of them, Xerosic gets rid of them, they are easier to, and there's attacks that get rid of them. It is much easier to get rid of special energy than it is basic energy, and I doubt that's a coincidence of design. I'm sure it's absolutely deliberate. These special energies are better and more powerful, so Pokemon gives us more ways to get rid of them to give a risk-reward. It makes perfect sense. And you'll hear me talking about this a lot on my YouTube videos about how against Toad decks you should never put down a special energy on turn 1 because you're going to lose it and then get trainer locked 9 times out of 10. So, yes, I like Flash Energy. There's no denying, I love Flash Energy. And this is coming from a guy who's going to play Manectric next season. Maybe not at every tournament, but I'm starting to hoard Manectrics. I've got myself a couple of regular ones. I'll get a couple more, and I'll get a few Megas over the next couple of weeks, ready for next season. And I will go to at least one tournament with Manectric decks. So Flash Energy for me is exciting. But honestly, I'm not 100% convinced it's going to see a huge amount of play. I could see it as a 1 or 2 of just in case you come against a Groudon deck, for instance. But I don't foresee a huge amount of people playing Flash Energy because it's too risky. Now, in a straight Lightning deck, I can see it being played. But most Lightning decks are going to want to play with other kinds of types, especially because you're attaching energy with Mega Manectric. More energy on the field more quickly equals you can afford to use more types of Pokemon. And you're going to want to play it with water Pokemon so they can both take advantage of rough seas. I do think Flash Energy will see play. I don't think Flash Energy will see as much play as everybody's thinking because the only one of these special energy which has consistently seen play, and it was a psychic energy, not the fairy energy, which gave easier a treat. I apologise for that. The fairies have had energy, but that's equally garbage. One of the things which... The only one which has really seen a huge amount of play is strong energy. And one of the things you've got to remember here, and one of the things which it comes to mind is people aren't using these special energies because the risk doesn't outweigh the reward. The only one that has really outweighed the risk is strong energy. But everybody's playing Muscle Band because Muscle Band's crazy overpowered. So you would expect people to be playing strong energy. Okay, I think there's enough on Flash Energy. Let's have a look at Giratina EX. Well, I say have a look. We don't really know anything about Giratina EX. We have got some ridiculous, we've got a picture. The art's kind of cool. We know it's got some kind of ability which prevents some effects from some Pokemon, but we don't know what. And we know that for some amount of energy you can do 100 damage and prevent your opponent playing tools, stadiums or special energy from his or her hand. As an interesting side note, if you get the new Vileplume out and use that attack, that's no items, including tools, no stadium, no special energy. So at that point they are going to be entirely limited to just stadium. So, something to bear in mind. And the last new card, it's another EX Mega EX combo. Oh, it should be pointed out, we have had confirmation. This is Ampharos we're about to talk about. We have confirmation of a Spirit Link. I don't know if we've got confirmation of a Spirit Link for Tyranitar, but as I've said a million times, well, not quite, but close. Pokemon have made it very, very clear. If it was a Mega EX that came out before Spirit Links, it ain't getting one. If it's released in a promotional pack, think Absol, think Metagross, think Diancie, it ain't getting one. All Mega EXs released around about this time, they are all going to be getting Spirit Links. You're going to have them. And we're seeing a similar story here to what we saw with Tyranitar EX. The basic isn't terrible. For one colourless energy, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, attach as many lightning as you find there to this Pokemon. I really like that for a turn 1 attack. Kind of like Rayquaza EX is 60 damage to an EX for 1 energy. It's not a great attack, you're not going to use it terribly often. But when you do use it, it can turn the tide. If you get lucky, then you can attach a bunch of energy on turn 1 and really get ready for turn 2. Heck, if you attach 1 lightning energy turn 1, to do that attack, if you hit 1 energy from the attack, all it's going to take is a double colourless to use Mega Ampharos EX next turn. So that's kind of cool. As a quick rulings query, and this has come up a few times, all of these special energy, your flash energy, strong energy, they only count as fighting, lightning energy, etc. when they are attached to a Pokemon. So Ampharos' attack here will not allow you to attach flash energy if you see it, because until it's attached to a Pokemon, it doesn't count as lightning energy. Just in the same way as you're not able to use Emerald Slash to get a herbal energy from Virizion. Herbal energy, by the way, is just an energy version of Potion for anyone that's wondering. Although slightly underpowered, actually, because Potion got raised to 30. So, quite interesting there. I like that first attack. The other attack, 2 lightning and a double colourless, 100 damage, not affected by weakness or resistance. That's actually a really bad attack. I actively dislike this because you want to be hitting for weakness here. It's going to be really good to be a lightning type Pokemon next format. We've seen Lugia EX, which might be quite good. We know Rayquaza, now that Seismitoad is being neutered, we know Rayquaza's going to be quite good. And I've just double checked, by the way, Herbal does heal 30, not 20, so it is in fact Potion in an energy. So we want to be lightning type so that we can hit for weakness. An attack that doesn't hit for weakness, I mean, put it this way. If it hit for weakness, you attach a Muscle Band, you're 1-hit KOing Rayquaza EX, the colourless one. So I don't like that at all. I do like the Mega. The Mega is good. The Mega is almost too good. 2 lightning and a double colourless, 120 damage. If you choose to do 30 to yourself, and you've got 220 HP, so you can afford to do 30 to yourself, you do 170. And automatic paralysis. And auto paralysis is strong. What that means is anything you don't 1-hit KO, you get a free hit on next turn. Okay, they can switch. Not if you combine it with Vileplume. You play Ampharos with Vileplume, and you've essentially got a 1-hit KO on anything. Because anything you don't 1-hit KO is automatically paralysed. And the only way you can get around it is, or your opponent get around it, is using abilities. You can't retreat when you're paralysed, and you can't use items to get around it. Mega Ampharos is another one of those Pokemon which is potentially a bit too powerful, except it's weak to fighting. So everything I said about Tyranitar being weak to fighting also applies to Mega Ampharos. But let me be very clear about this. This Mega Ampharos is damn good. I think you should play it with something like Vileplume, so you've got the whole, like Excelgor Vileplume was back in the day, where you do the automatic paralysis and then trainer lock them. Because if you don't trainer lock them, people will just play 4 switch cards. Most times they'll have a switch, especially with Shaman making the format much faster, and boom, straight away you're out of the paralysis. But if you can play this with Vileplume, holy moly, this could be good. For anyone that's forgotten, just so we're clear, the Vileplume is the new one that's coming out in Bandit Ring, which stops both players playing item cards. So you can set it up on the bench, and then you've got basically full trainer lock from the bench. It's going to be good, let's put it that way. So, the focus for the rest of this podcast today then, building decks on a budget. It's something I've had requested a couple of dozen times over the last year or so, and it's something I've never been able to get round to. I wanted a week when nothing was going on. Next week is between the US and Japanese ban of Lissandra's trump card. So I think next week is going to be a really good week to sit down and look at which decks are still viable with the banning of trump card. And then the week after that, maybe we'll look at Broken Time Space for grass and see which grass Pokemon can really take advantage of this new card. So for today, let's go for budget decks. And it starts with one hell of a disclaimer. Shaymin EX. You can't get around this. Shaymin EX has come out in our most recent set. It might be banned. It might be rotated out after World 2017. That is the most cards tend to be in the format for around a couple of years. So we might see it banned in 2017. But I think it is, and something weird could happen, but I think it is safe to assume we are going to have Shaymin in the format for a full 2 formats after this one. You need Shaymin EX. What I would say is it could go one of 2 ways. If you're going to get them, it's worth getting them early-ish, because as these cards go on, they go up and up in value. Look at Uxie Level X or Luxray Level X back in the day, going forward to something like Mewtwo, which only climbed in price, or things like Virizion and Genesect that never got particularly cheap until the deck became unviable. But there is a counterpoint to that, and that is the really good Pokemon have been coming out in tins. I talked about this on my little video I did on my YouTube channel about Lissandra's trump card being banned. Things like Yveltal and Mewtwo and Darkrai and Lugia and Deoxys and Thundurus, they all came out in tins. Now, we have got some tins coming out this month with the starters on, your Sceptile, your Swampert, your Blaziken. I think there is a better than even chance that the next set of tins is going to have Shaymin EX in. So maybe hold off for then, but if it's not coming out in the next set of tins or you need it earlier, and I know this is building on a budget, so I apologise for having to say this, you need Shaymin EX. Now, you don't need Shaymin EX, and I know that's a complete contradiction, so let me be clear. If you want to be able to have a choice of decks for the upcoming format, if you want to play a variety of styles and give yourself a good amount of choice, you need Shaymin EX. There is an alternative. There are 2 cards that stop Shaymin EX. There is Silent Lab, the Stadium, which blocks all abilities of basic Pokemon, and there is Wobbuffet, the Pokemon that when active blocks all abilities of non-psychic Pokemon. Both of those cards will stop Shaymin. And in fact, if you build decks based around all of them, you can in fact stop your opponent playing Shaymin. If you don't play Shaymin, your opponent will have a speed advantage on you. They will have a consistency advantage over you. And that will lead you to an awful lot of losses. The alternative is you directly counter Shaymin, and the way to do it is with Wobbuffet and Silent Lab. But your choices are going to be limited. Let's take, for instance, Latios EX. Well, that's a Pokemon, and I suggested playing Latios with Wobbuffet. I was on Twitter or Facebook or something the other day. And my suggestion was, play Latios with Wobbuffet. Latios EX, the Mega, hits anything for 120, and then Wobbuffet comes up and hits for 130, and you're one-hit KOing anything. 2-hit KOing anything. And you can afford to play Dimension Valley. And somebody replied with a comment along the lines of, well, if I'm playing Latios EX, I want to play a Stadium which helps Latios EX. And that is a ridiculous comment to make. Because there are no stadiums that help Latios EX. Now, if I'm playing a fighting deck, I want to play Fighting Stadium to do more damage, or I want to play Scorched Earth to draw more cards. If I'm playing a Lightning or a Water deck, I want to play something like Rough Seas to heal damage. If I'm playing a Fairy deck, I want to play Fairy Garden to give myself free retreat. If I'm playing a deck with lasers, I want to play Verbank City Gym in order to add damage to poison. There is nothing that helps Latios EX, nothing properly. I cannot think of a single stadium that makes Latios EX better. So why not play something like Silent Lab? It doesn't help Latios EX, but gosh darn, it can hinder your opponent. Now the argument is Latios EX is supposed to be fast deck, so you really need Shaymin yourself. But you can play Latios EX with Silent Lab to counter your opponent's Shaymins. Of course, your opponent can just play their own stadium and then play as many Shaymins as they like, but it's a soft counter. It's not perfect, but it will do. that's a shaming thing out the way. Honestly, if you're listening to this, and I know I have a lot of listeners who want to hear about budget decks, and I'm sorry for this to be the introduction, but I suppose think of it as kind of a setup cost for the hobby. You need Shaman EX. Now here is an alternative. Maybe club together with a couple of mates, buy some Shaman between you, on the understanding that, some tournaments you'll use Shaman EX and your opponent will play a slower Wobbuffet, Silent Lab, etc. deck, and then you'll swap. Or get together with mates and borrow Shaman when you go to tournaments and they don't, etc. Maybe buy 6 Shaman between 2 or 3 of you, and then work it out that way. Now, I was having a bit of chat on Facebook earlier with Mies Breckenmeyer, sorry for the pronunciation, a very, very good Dutch player. And he was basically saying one of the things that you can rely on here, now that Lysandra's trump card has been banned, you can get away with playing 2 Shaman in most decks rather than 4, because you don't need to play the whole 4 Shaman plus Super Scoop Up to reuse it over and over again. So that's a Shaman introduction. A couple of other things about saving money. Don't buy packs. And don't buy boxes. Now, I opened up 2 boxes because I got given 2 boxes for commentating at UK Nationals. Now, for anyone that's asking, I didn't do a box opening. If you want to see box openings, just send me an email, send me a tweet, let me know. I don't understand box openings, but I am willing to buy a box of Bandit Ring, or whatever it's going to be called in the UK, or Hooper Unbound, whatever it's called. I'm willing to buy a box of that the day of release, and then do a box opening and upload it the day that set comes out. Because there's no point doing it, a month after the set's out. I'm willing to do a box opening for that set the day it comes out if people really want me to. Like I say, I'm looking to grow the YouTube channel, but I just don't understand box openings. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. But boxes, I could have bought those 2 boxes for £140. In the UK, it's possible to buy boxes for £70. And I pulled all right. I got a playset of all the trainers, although I only got 2 Mega Turbo per box, and as the best trainer in the set, potentially, that's really cheeky. It's like they did with Pokemon Catcher and Emerging Powers. You will always get a playset of every bad trainer in every set. You've got Latios Spirit Link coming out your ear. I've got Ultra Balls, because they've been printed so many times, but I didn't get I only got a playset of Mega Turbo by buying 2 boxes, which I thought was really cheeky. And I got a bunch of other EXs, but honestly, I would have been better off just buying singles. I got 1 Reshiram. Well, that's going to be no good for a Mega Rayquaza deck. I mean, the only EXs I got 2 of, I got 2 Latios and 2 Shaman. Well, I need 4 Shaman for a lot of decks, and I can't even make a Latios deck with 2 Latios. But I can go and buy them on eBay for £4.25. You're better off buying singles. Now, in terms of singles, shop around. Go on eBay. Go on trollandtoad.com, professoroak.com in the UK. Go on chaoscards.co.uk. Shop around. Speak to your friends. Often you'll be able to find there's a bunch of trading. Just search on Facebook for Pokemon trade or sale groups, and you will find people selling these cards. And you can usually get a better price on them than you can on somewhere like eBay. Buy singles because it's the best way to do it. When it comes to trainers, things like Professor Sycamore, your best bet is to go on eBay or Facebook and buy a playset. When I started playing Donphan, I didn't have any Robo-Subs, I didn't have any Fighting Stadium, I didn't have any Corinna, I didn't have any Focus Sash, and I didn't have any... There's another card I didn't have, but I can't remember off the top of my head now. And I went on eBay and I got 4 Fighting Stadiums for £1, 4 Robo-Subs for £1, 4 Focus Sash for £1, 4 Corinna for about £2. Buy play sets of trainers on eBay or Facebook, and you will often be able to buy full play sets, and these are including postage, for, a couple of quid, couple of dollars for a play set of cards. And you can use them for deck after deck. So that's the best way to go about getting your trainers and stuff like that. So, there's a few little tips for kind of getting stuff a little bit cheaper. Other than that, sorry. But, go to League, trade at League, stuff like that. Now, one type of deck which you might wish to go for is tin-based decks. Now, Pokemon do tin promos every so often. The most recent ones were Groudon and Kyogre, and they are both viable. And they can both be run with a minimum of Shaman. Groudon, you could easily go Groudon Wobbuffet and play no Shaman whatsoever. And you can get the regular Groudon and the regular Kyogre in tins. Now, the big problem here is you still need to buy the primals, but with these decks you can get away with 3, maybe even 2 of the primals. So although you've got to pay some money for them, it's going to be cheaper than a lot of decks out there, and Groudon's going to be super viable next year. Now, in the UK, there's a bunch of Tesco shops which have been reducing these tins to £8.50, which for 4 packs and a promo is pretty good. I've gone out and bought myself 3 Groudon tins just to try and get them. I've got a Koga tin as well, just because I wanted a promo. I'm not going to probably play it much next season. But if you look at the tins, and like you've seen this with Mewtwo, with Yveltal, Darkrai and stuff, even if you don't buy the tins, when an EX has been released as a tin promo, those tin promos go down to £2 or £3, talking about $3 or $4 per card. So if you can play decks based around tin promos, that will often make stuff a lot cheaper. So yes, you have to buy Primal Groudon, but you can get the regular Groudon in tins, or you can buy the tin promo for very, very cheap. And then you can play it with cards like Wobbuffet and Robo Substitute, which are very, very cheap indeed. So that's something which you really should bear in mind. Play decks based around tins. The other thing I like about tins is the pull rates are much, much better than just going to buy 4 random packs. Sorry about that. In the 4 tins I bought, one of them I had a couple of holos. In one tin, I got a full art Mega Manectric and a secret rare Dive Ball. In one tin, I got a full art Xerosic, and in the other tin, I got a full art Trevenant. So in 3 of my 4 tins, I pulled a full art, and in the other one, I got 2 holos. So, better than average odds, I would say. But let's say you don't want to buy the tins, you don't want to use the tin promos, and you don't want to use Shamans. What have we got? Now, I'm going to split into 2 camps here. I am, and I hate doing this, as I've made very clear, I am going to split into pre and post rotation, and I am going to assume an XY rotation. But that Lissandra's trump card Japanese thing that specifically reference X and Y on makes me feel really confident about an XY rotation. Now, there are 2 decks which I reckon are going to be good this season and then going to rotate, i.e. they're not going to be legal next season. So these are decks to consider for any tournaments before Worlds, or indeed up to and including Worlds. Firstly, Donphan. Donphan, and this is the list I've been running, you can easily run without any Shaman. You can run a trainer engine of 4 Juniper, 4 Random Receiver, 4 VS Seeker, combine it with Roller Skates and Acrobike, and that is one incredibly fast deck. And actually, I didn't play any Ultra Ball in my deck, and it was still super fast and super consistent, so you wouldn't be able to find a Bloomin' Shaman even if you played one. It's got really good matchups against anything that isn't Trainer Lock, and the reason is very simple. Against non-EX decks, you're hitting harder than they are, and against EX decks, you're 2-hit KOing, they're 1-hit KOing. But between Robo Substitute, you put it in the active as a basic Pokemon, the opponent kills it and doesn't get a prize. Life Dew, when it's attached to a Pokemon, it's a tool, and it gets KO'd, your opponent doesn't get a prize. And Focus Sash, if you would be 1-hit KO'd, you go down to 10 HP instead and discard Focus Sash. Your opponent has got to Lysandra some games for all 6 prizes. And now that Lysandra's trump card has been banned, your opponent isn't going to be Lysandring for 6 prizes. Well, I suppose they could if they use 2 Lysandra and 4 VS Seeker, and they use all 4 VS Seeker for Lysandra and never have to get rid of one with Juniper or an Ultra Ball. Yeah, they can indeed. And that's why it trades very favourably. All you really need is a 4/4 Donphan line. The most expensive card in the whole deck are Hawlucha. That's the most expensive card, and that's a holo you can pick up for £4 or £5 in the UK, probably about $5 or $6 in the US. That's a good call. And the other deck, which I think could be relevant up to Nationals but not afterwards, is Flareon and Leafeon. And these are the Plasma Flareon and the Plasma Leafeon. These are cards that hit fairly good for cheap and a non-EX Pokemon. They are viable because they give up 1 prize and do decent damage, and they're cheap because they're just random rare cards. Leafeon does 20 damage times the amount of energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon for 1 energy. Flareon does 20 damage plus 10 for each Pokemon in the discard for a double colourless. Now, you might want to use cards like Deoxys EX to add 10 damage to each of your attacks, but Deoxys EX was released as a tin promo, so you can pick him up probably for $3 or $4 in a lot of places. It's not an expensive card. The other deck which you could use, this doesn't really work on its own very much, but Empoleon does 10 times the number of all Pokemon out for 1 water energy. And let's not forget that with Skyfield, that could be up to 16 Pokemon. Now, you would just play 1 or 2 Empoleon with Archie's Ace in the hole, and that would allow you to essentially, it's a supporter for those of you that forget, if it's the only card in your hand, you play it, put any water Pokemon on your bench, i.e. Empoleon can go down as if you were a basic, and then draw 5 cards. And again, that's not going to be, it was a random rare, it's going to cost a couple of quid, few dollars, but it's not going to cost a huge amount. They're the 2 decks which are useful now, but I bring them up at the beginning very simply because they're going to go out of fashion within a month or 2. They're going to be rotated after Worlds. So if you're on a budget, it's probably not the best idea to buy decks which are going to go out of fashion really quickly, and these ones will. So I put the call out over Facebook, and I've asked some friends some advice, and I've got what I think is a list of decks or cards which are going to be good next format, which you should consider investing in. I am deliberately going for decks which are going to be cheap, and I'm not giving you deck lists. It's a podcast. No one wants to sit and listen to me read 10 deck lists. But what I will do is tell you the basic cards, your main attackers, if you will, and you can go and make a deck from there, and you can make a deck which isn't going to be terribly expensive. Most of these could really benefit from a Shaman or 2. If you really don't want to play Shaman, play stuff like Silent Lab or Wobbuffet, and consider playing cards like Roller Skates or Acrobike to speed up your deck. The first one, and this is the most obvious one, now that Lissandra's trump card has been banned, Night March. Night March does a lot of damage very quickly, attacking with Joltik for a DCE, or Pumpkaboo for a DCE, assuming you've got a Dimension Valley in play, otherwise it's free energy. And it does 30 times the number of Pokemon with Night March in your discard pile. And you can use cards like Battle Compressor to get them in there. Your main Pokemon in this deck are Joltik, a common, Pumpkaboo, I think it's an uncommon, and Lampent, which I think is also an uncommon. You're not using rare cards here, and that's pretty gosh darn good. Now, after rotation, I'm assuming we're losing Mew EX, which was the most expensive card in the deck, but you're still going to have a lot of traction in terms of being able to do a fair bit of damage fairly heftily here. I like Night March. It's going to be a very popular deck, and you can make it quite cheaply. One card, this is more of a card than a deck, is Raichu from the X and Y expansion. By the way, I should have said this at the beginning. My preferred way of looking up cards, go to Pokegym, POKEGYM.net/tower. It's a brilliant database which allows you to search, and you can bring up any Pokemon. You can get a nice big image of it. This is my preferred place to go and look up cards. I always have it open when I'm recording a podcast or a YouTube video to refer back to, and actually it's that I use to look up Herbal Energy to check how much it healed as I was recording. So use that. So if you're unsure of any of these cards I'm talking about, just for it, and it's not something I'm going to ask often, but maybe for this section of the podcast, save it for when you're sitting at a computer, or listen back. Maybe listen now and listen back when you're sitting at a computer. Open up pokegym.net/tower so you can look at these cards as I'm explaining them. Raichu XY does 20 times the number of bench Pokemon you've got for a double colourless energy. Skyfield, the new stadium, allows you to have 8 bench Pokemon. At a Muscle Band, you're doing 180 damage for 1 double colourless energy. That's crazy. He's going to be cheap. I mean, he's going to go up in price like Empoleon did, but it's a holo. It's never going to get to like $20, $30 a card. You might end up paying $5 to $10 if you buy at the wrong time, but it's still the kind of card which is never going to go crazy price-wise. And you can play it essentially with anything. Yeah, you can play it with Shaman, but you can play it with Trevenant to block trainers. You can play it with Slurpuff to draw more cards. Or you can play with any kind of other attacker. The brilliant thing about Raichu, he attacks for just double colourless energy. So you can play whatever the hell you like with Raichu, because you can play what you're going to need to play some basic energy, and you can play whatever basic energy you want. Maybe play a Donking deck with Raichu and Latios and play Psychic Energy. Maybe play it with Trevenant. Who knows? Do whatever you want. Speaking of Trevenant, here's another card I would recommend. Now Trevenant, blocks trainers from your opponent if he's in the active, and the new supporter Wally allows you to evolve Trevenant on turn 1. You go first. On turn 1, you can evolve Phantump into Trevenant using Wally, and your opponent is blocked from trainers for the entire game. You stick a Psychic double colourless, he's doing 60 damage plus 20 to 2 bench Pokemon, and obviously you can put a Muscle Band on there to do more damage. He is another card who can really take advantage of next format. It's a holo, again from the XY expansion, and it's not particularly expensive. You'll be able to pick it up for $5 to $10 per card. You can probably find some bargains, some website or eBay auctions. If you look around, you can probably find it really, really cheap. Again, you can play it with whatever you like. You can play it with a hit and run card. That's a card that does damage and switches to the bench, like Gengar EX, which might be a little bit expensive, but again, Gengar's not good, so it's not going to get crazy expensive. It's not going to be like Virizion or Genesect or Seismitoad that got really expensive. Another card I really like next format, no, that's a lie, I really like it this format, I'm not such a big fan next format, is Shedinja from Roaring Skies. That's the 30 HP Pokemon, which allows you to do 50 damage for each damage counter on him. And this is a fun little deck, which again is going to be very cheap because you're relying on Shedinja, which is like a random rare. It's not going to get expensive. Big problem is, and I've given this combo on the podcast before, the really good combo is you use Mew to attack, and you use a combination of Frozen City down and Rainbow Energy to do 30 damage when you attach to Mew. Then you put a Muscle Band and do 170 for 1 energy on turn 1. The problem is, next format, there's no Mew and there's no Frozen City, we assume, which means it's harder to do damage. It's harder to do damage to Shedinja yourself, and it's just less consistent. It's not going to work as well. And even if you put like that new boot tool, which is coming out in the next set, you still only got 50 HP. So I like it in theory, and I think it's going to be good at some point, but I don't think Shedinja is going to be viable after Nationals with the cards we have right now. And let's bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that new cards will be released all the time. Now, we've already mentioned Wobbuffet, and Wobbuffet's a card I like purely because it directly counters Shaman. It's also got a nifty attack. It does 10 damage more than is already on the defending Pokemon for 2 energy. You get a Dimension Valley in play, it's for 1 energy. And I like this. And there's a lot of interesting Psychic Pokemon around. Natu allows you to take an extra prize if you take a KO with him. He doesn't do much, but he does it for 1 energy if you've got Dimension Valley out. There's that new Deoxys, which can hit alright from Roaring Skies. You've got Latios that can do 40 damage for 1 energy on the first turn of the game. You can pair Wobbuffet with an awful lot of stuff. You can just play it with bats, your Zubat, your Golbat, your Crobat. You know, you're talking about a common, an uncommon, and a non-holo rare. They're never going to get too expensive. So you do damage using the ability of Crobat and Golbat, and then you do a lot of damage with Wobbuffet. Again, you're talking about a bunch of 1 prize Pokemon, so it takes your opponent a long time to kill them. Again, you're attacking for no energy with your Crobats and your Golbats, or 1 energy with Wobbuffet, assuming you've got a Dimension Valley down. And you've got room for a bunch of other tech cards, if you wish. Golbat does 30 damage when you evolve into him, Golbat does 20. So if you can evolve 2 Golbats, you do 40 damage, and then you can come straight out and do 50 damage with Wobbuffet. 70 damage if you've got a Muscle Band attached. He's on 110. The next turn, you're doing 130 damage of a Muscle Band, putting him on 240, and you're 2-hit KOing Mega EXs. Just for 2 Golbats and an attack. So you can play around with your Golbats and your Crobats from Phantom Forces and your Wobbuffet, also from Phantom Forces, using cards like Dimension Valley. And you can make a very inexpensive deck, because the only real Pokemon you need to use are Wobbuffet, a rare, Golbat, an uncommon, Zubat, an uncommon, and Crobat, a rare. They're not expensive cards. Now, a bunch of people have suggested Medicham from Primal Clash with the that allows you to double attack. I'm not a fan of Medicham. I prefer Excadrill, as much as I really want to be a fan of Excadrill. I played Excadrill Seismitoad at a tournament this year. I went undefeated, but I started off 0-2 and then won the next 3 games. But at the time I played them, my opponents had a combined win of 1. 2 of them hadn't won a game, and 1 had won a single game. So it wasn't the most representative day. I started off playing against people who were having a bad day. I love Excadrill as a Pokemon. He's one of my favourites. I want that Excadrill to be amazing. The good news is Excadrill and Medicham are both very cheap. The other good news is they both have potential. They're both from Primal Clash. Go and have a look at them on pokegym.net/tower. But honestly, I don't think they're viable. And as much as I'm talking about budget decks, I'm trying to talk about decks which I can see you doing well at in tournaments. Maybe not winning every tournament. Generally, the players that win every tournament have a lot of cards and have a lot of options and can play the right deck for that particular tournament. But if you're playing on a budget, I'm trying to give you ideas here for decks that could win the odd tournament. And Wobbuffet Golbat could have a really good day. Raichu decks could have a good day, as could Trevenant. Now, there are 2, and all the decks I've given you so far are not based around EXs. Except for Groudon, but there's the Primal. So I think if you've got a little bit of a budget, I really, really would recommend Groudon. I think it's going to be good next year. Now, you've got to be careful because the new set's introducing an awful lot of grass support and Groudon's weak to grass. But if you're that worried, actually play Weakness Policy. The only expensive card in Groudon is going to be Primal Groudon, and you could play it with as few as 2. I would play a free line, but you could get away with only playing 2. And I think it could be a genuinely kind of a juggernaut powerhouse deck next format. It's nowhere near as expensive as playing something like your Rayquaza deck with 3 or 4 Shaman, 3 or 4 Rayquaza EX, and 3 or 4 Megas. Now, there are a couple of EXs I am going to recommend, and one of them is Latios. Because I looked on eBay the other day. On British eBay, you can literally get Latios EX for less than a £5, for the same price you would pay some places for Trevenant or Raichu. And if you're buying a playset for 20 quid, you can construct this whole deck for 50 or 60 quid. Now, you do need to play the Mega, but the brilliant thing I like about Latios EX is the non-Mega has a really good attack. The non-Mega does 40 damage for a Psychic Energy, and you can add to this using Muscle Band. And a lot of people next format are going to be playing stuff like Night March, Raichu, Trevenant, etc. And you can attack with Latios going first. You're going to get some donks if you play Latios next format. The Mega EX does 124 free energy to anywhere on the field and can snipe Shamans. But you only need... I really think you could get away with 2 in this deck. Now, I would like to play 3 probably, but you could get away with 2 because you really can focus on the non-Mega Latios. You can play it with Wobbuffet and Silent Lab to make sure that there is never going to be a Shaman around. You can take KOs of Wobbuffet to put the prize trade in your favour, i.e. KO with Latios and then retreat to take... hit with Latios, retreat, heal and get the KO with Wobbuffet. And you could be looking at a very viable deck there. It's on my list of ones to test next format. Now, to be fair, it's going to have real problems with fast one-hit KO decks like Rayquaza EX. But nothing to stop you putting a 2-2 Raichu line in. All you really need is a couple of Wobbuffet, a couple of Latios, some Psychic Energy, and then Silent Lab. You've got space for Raichu. You don't even have to play Double Dragon Energy. Rather than playing the Mega Latios EX, you could just play Latios EX for donking and Raichu for big one-hit KOs. That could be a viable deck. I don't know, I haven't tested enough. But the one thing I want to say here is I'm giving you ideas of good Pokemon which are going to be fairly cheap. There's nothing to stop you playing Trevenant Raichu, or Latios Raichu, or Wobbuffet Latios, etc. And, like I say, Latios you can play anti-Shaman cards. So even though you're playing a kind of donkey card, you can slow it down and stop your opponent using Shaman. The other interesting thing is, and this is something which has amused me for a while, probably because I play too much Pokemon, but if I'm playing against something like, let's say, an Aromatisse style deck, not a cheap option most of the time because a lot of cards are very expensive, but if I'm playing against, an Aromatisse deck, if I've got a Wobbuffet active and a Silent Lab down, then Silent Lab is going to turn off Wobbuffet's ability and turn back on Aromatisse's ability. That amuses me. Sorry about that. Now, Aromatisse can be a cheap deck, Because Aromatisse is just a holo, and you can play it with Xerneas, which has come out in theme decks. Aromatisse is also in a theme deck, the same theme deck I should add, and you can play it just with Xerneas EX, which has been a tin promo. It's not the optimal way to play the deck, but you could. I don't think it's going to be great next format, but that would also be a pretty cheap deck, because you can buy a couple of theme decks, which will get you your Fairy Energy, your Aromatisse, your Xerneas, etc. Then you buy a couple of tin promos, and you've got almost the entire deck from, a few tin promos and a couple of theme decks. The last card I would recommend is Yveltal. Now, I don't know how great Yveltal's going to be. It has dipped in popularity lately, but that's because Seismitoad decks got ridiculous, and with Laser going out and Trump Card being banned, next format, we can assume Yveltal's going to rise again. It's based around a non-holo rare, which I believe you can also get in a theme deck, regular Yveltal, and Yveltal EX, which was a tin promo, so you can get it incredibly cheaply, and that's it. Now, you can add any other cards in you want. Maybe you buy a Mega Absol collection and play Mega Absol EX. Maybe you add in Raichu again. The one bad thing about it is it's got that lightning weakness, which is the same weakness which Rayquaza's got. And because Rayquaza's weak to lightning, everyone's going to want to play lightning. And because everyone's playing lightning, think Raichu, Ampharos, etc., that's going to make stuff like Yveltal less viable. But you can make good Yveltal decks cheaply because all the constituent parts have been released in what we call sealed product, your tins, your theme decks, etc. And if you really want to build cheap decks, you want to be focusing on rares, essentially non-EX decks, or EXs that were released in tins. That is the cheapest way to go about making a deck. Honestly, for Nationals, I would recommend Donphan or Night March for budget decks. Both can be made cheaply, both will be good. Donphan, by the way, wrecks Night March, and I don't want to hear anyone say anything else. When I've played Night March in tournaments, I played it in a best of 3 in Yeovil. I lost a game because I didn't set up. In the other 2 games, I lost 1 prize over 2 games. The other game I played in the tournament, I didn't lose a single prize on the way to a 2-0 victory. Because again, they're Lysandring for every single prize, and I'm 1-hit KOing Pumpkaboo or Joltik, and I'm 2-hit KOing Mewtwo, while they're not taking prizes. I can even use Horlichur to kill the Mew in 1 turn. Mew, of course, not Mewtwo. So, but if you're only looking at after, you're looking for a bit of an investment, I would say go and get Raichu and Trevenant. Raichu and Trevenant are going to be good cards, which are going to be good for all of next format. Turn 1 Trainer Lock is never going to be bad. And a Pokemon which, a stage 1 that can hit for 180 for 1 energy attachment is never going to be bad. It might not be amazing at times, but it's never going to be bad. Wobbuffet is a card I think you should invest in, and if you're not going to buy Shaymins, go and buy 4 Silent Lab and 4 Wobbuffet, and 4 Dimension Valley. Because I know Dimension Valley turns off Silent Lab, but if you're attacking with Wobbuffet, you want to be using Dimension Valley and then switching to Silent Lab if you're not attacking with Wobbuffet. The other card I really think has got some legs is Latios EX, but I am only giving you this as a budget option for 2 reasons. Firstly, that's a hell of a cheap EX at the moment. And secondly, it's going to get you a bunch of cheap wins. It's going to get you a bunch of wins in tournaments just from donking people or from early pressure. But I don't think it's going to stand up to really hard-hitting decks because for free energy, you're doing an almost 1-hit KO for free energy. Also, you're doing a bunch of damage for free energy. Then you're going to put up Wobbuffet and you'll need a Dimension Valley and a Psychic Energy in order to get the KO. But then they're taking 3 prizes, you're taking 2. It's not great. Against a slower 1-hit KOing deck like Groudon, this could work, but not against something like your colourless Rayquaza. But if you're just going for a budget option, Latios EX is cheap. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my advice for building on a budget. That's probably not an exhaustive list, but I've hopefully given you some ideas, giving you some cards to go and get, and giving you some things to think about. As always, if you want to email me for more specific help, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, and I will get round to it as quick as I can. And I will, get back to you. Chaps just emailed me today about decks which I think will be good X and Y on. It's not something I'm willing to talk about in the podcast just yet, but a random email from somebody asking my advice, that I can reply to. So if you are that person, I haven't replied, but I will very soon. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that. Now that you've finished my lovely podcast, might I suggest going to youtube.com/PTCGRadio. Rounds 1 and 7 from UK Nationals are already up, and I'm hoping to now be uploading 1 round a day. tomorrow round 2, Friday round 3, etc, etc. There's going to be a whole heap of wonderful UK Nationals based Pokemon action going up for you, so go join in with that, please. I'm sure you won't regret it. Thank you very much for listening I should say, too many YouTube videos. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.